There we go. That one you should be hearing now. Let me know, KP, if you hear this now. I'm assuming you do. Well, there's 6 minutes of fucking wasted time. um, I'm gonna assume it's working. KP, let me know when again in the chat if you can't. Okay, good. Welcome, guys. 6 minutes into the first Patreon. I've recognized a whole bunch of new faces there. As you can tell, these things are very, very informal compared to the more polished videos I put out. The coffee, the cooking, as well as the podcast, Red Morning with Carl, or Rule Zero with Rolo Tomasi and friends. The format's fairly simple. I just put out a post a week prior. You guys give me anything you want to talk about. There is no red flag conversations, no topics that are out of bounds, or at least I've never seen one yet that I would even feel the need to. I did go full on with StreamYard, and I love the guys so much. I'm keeping their branding up there as much as I possibly can. I do have a link. I'll start providing these things here. If you guys are starting your own streaming things now that Google Hangouts is being removed from the Google YouTube ecosystem, these guys are amazing. Uh, I don't look at these beforehand. I want to research them as we're here. That way you can see a lot of the process that goes into why Red Pill guys have the attitudes or opinions or tactics or strategies that they have. A lot of the time, I'm looking stuff up on the spot. One of the benefits of my military training was that I learned how to find information as opposed to remembering information, which comes in very handy for a lot of things, especially this. So the first question was from Liam Cregan. Can you talk more about vetting, but setting boundaries to be a top 7 boundaries to set? I could just rehash what I went on the post here, but I'll kind of try and give you a better answer for it that's podcast or that's video friendly here. um, every guy that I had met when I was growing up that was either married and miserable or divorced or separated all had the exact same thing to tell me, that their wife was a bitch and not to get married. Thing is, they all thought their wives were great when they first met. And something that became very clear early on is that vetting is just a post hoc rationalization pretending to be due diligence. So you'll find a guy who, example, wants a Christian girl and he will rationalize in his head. As soon as you get a hooker to start touching his dick, have her go to church a couple times, all of a sudden she's a good Christian girl. You wouldn't believe how many porn stars leave porn and then marry pastors. It's more than one. The fact that it's any of them boggles the mind. Like Jesus hung out with hookers, maybe that is more Christ-like. I don't know. Um, Adding to vetting, post hoc rationalization, and the thing is, guys don't know what we want in general. I'll use a great example of this where guys talk about tattoos being a red flag. The red flags are largely like vetting mechanisms. Problem with tattoos, I was mostly stationed in and ran most of my game in Victoria, BC, Canada. Everybody had a tattoo. Every girl had one. If you were vetting for tattoos, you were going home single. And it was something I learned that it's the thought apocalypse. Like all these things that used to be whorish activities in the 1950s that are unheard of are so common now that they're just their their utility in vetting for a kind of woman that would be happier with you and you be happier with her, they've just lost their utility. So it's a waste of time to pretend. You can say it's colored hair, but like I said, a really good friend that we dated briefly didn't work out, still a wonderful woman, massively colored her hair all the time. She was a hairdresser, and that was her thing. Absolutely nothing wrong with her, except for that. Wouldn't be tattoos. My girl now, she had tons of tattoos. My roommate had tons of tattoos. A lot of girls that weren't slutty also had tattoos. Like everybody had them. So if you're using that as your metric, you're basically finding these weird traits that make no sense. And the big problem I found with it is that if you're just using it as post hoc rationalization, you're picking girls that are actively looked like they know these symbols. Most girls kind of know the things that make them look slutty. That's why they keep it on the down low. But they know, for instance, ditch all my party friends, hide the tattoos under a t-shirt, find me a good boy. My roommate, great example of that. Big titty BPD girl, lots of fun. fiercely loyal to her guys when she was actually with them, but whatever. I noticed that she just dropped off the face of the earth, and then all of a sudden, a year later on Facebook, she shows up with a husband and a kid. So you guys can vet if you want to, but I guarantee you're going to be surprised with how it ends up. As far as boundaries go, and here's the thing, I love this because there was this post I put out yesterday, kind of a bit of a tongue in cheek joke, but way too much effort and it kind of fell flat. This guy called the Huntsman was blaming TRP for turning his woman into hookers and not taking responsibility for the guys that they try to help. It's fine, whatever. But where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, boundaries. The problem with boundaries is I can't tell you what to have as boundaries. Those are things you have to discover on your own. And that's why I find they work better. Boundaries, vetting is what do you want in a relationship? Boundaries are what will I not accept in a relationship. And I find that's far superior because you're not going to be invested in things you don't want. So you're very, very clear about those. And the only way to get it is experience. So I hate to tell you this, but you're going to have to plow through. And this is a funny thing too. This guy Rivellino, I think is his name. He came up with a 30-30 rule. Get 30 girls under your belt and be over 30 by the time you and 30 grand in the bank before you settle down. Royce or Chateau Artiste actually said 12. Because he said when it comes to numbers, that's about the time you're going to get 2 shitty girls, 2 really good hot girls, and then the rest of them are going to be middling. And he says that's kind of like the bare minimum you need to be able to make an informed opinion. I would say go until you can't remember all their names. At that point, it becomes less memorable and more of a process, so then you can have an accurate indication as to what is and what is acceptable. And the only way to learn it, I hate to say, is learning it the hard way. The only hard and fast boundaries rule that I can say is if a girl says you don't need protection and she's on the pill or she's handled the birth control, I don't think that's a risk worth taking, even if bareback is fine. So unless you're snipped or you have some other kind of birth control, like if Vagisil comes out and people are still watching this goddamn video, fill your boots. Other than that, that would be the only hard and fast red or boundary I can think of. But most of them are going to be pretty common. And even when I tell you this, you kind of still have to experience it yourself. Like disrespecting you in front of peers and that. By say disrespect, I mean talking shit. That's an easy one that you're going to figure out. Girls that just go off the radar and not tell you where they are give the perception of impropriety. So if it's a girls' night out and you don't hear from her till 6 in the morning when she needs a ride or when she needs a ride home from some random part of town, it's pretty much a hard and fast boundary. The only thing I'll say on boundaries, and then we'll move on here, is if you don't enforce the boundaries, then they aren't boundaries. They're just wishes. So if a girl crosses your boundary and you don't pull your attention, your affection, or in worst cases, your commitment, then all you're doing is establishing that she can walk all over you, and I guarantee you she will. You might lose the girl, but you'll keep your self-respect and your dignity. And I guarantee you over the long run, that's going to matter more. So I hope that answers your question, Liam. Feel free, add something in the comments if you got some more clarification you're looking for. Next one's by Bagley, 232. Nice. I didn't know there was that many Bagleys. Welcome, by the way. New face. Haven't recognized you. Thank you so much for contributing. Stuff that makes it all worthwhile having you guys there. Recently, I found myself almost returning to the plantation. I was looking at getting into a relationship with a woman, and in the midst of that, caught myself going back to blue pill behavior. Fortunately, I did catch myself and quickly broke it off with the woman. In spite of moving forward with my life, I'm having a bout of one-itis. Any insight you can provide, I would appreciate it. This is vague on details, so I'm going to take some assumptions here. Hopefully I get somewhat close to what your situation is. When you're talking about going back to blue pill behavior, I can only assume you mean starting to have codependence, scarcity, and validation-seeking behavior with the girl, which makes sense when you said you were having one-itis. Why you dumped her, I don't know. To be honest, it wasn't her fault. It was kind of your fault. Now, I mean, you can dump a girl for whatever reason you want. There is no judgment that matters except for your own. But on this one, I usually follow the idea of having a sparring partner. If you guys don't know, a sparring partner is what I suggest to guys, and it's not fully agreed upon. So this is pretty much like the Ryan Stone thing, not a red pill canon. But if you're in a dead bedroom, a sexless relationship with a girl, don't immediately leave unless you absolutely have to. If she's smacking you around, doing drugs, that sort of shit. Other than that, what you have is a walking, talking shit test of a sparring partner, and it would be such a shame to waste that gift by working on your map by yourself. Having a girl that finds you inherently unattractive and has deep seated, embedded opinions of you that are very hard to change makes you really tighten up your game. And if it works with her, it'll work with everybody. Then you can dump her. So if I had to take a guess here, I would say it's just scarcity. You got into a relationship of a woman and you slowly started to become more validation seeking, codependent, and needy. How to get rid of that? The easy answer, and it's the one any guy will tell you off the top of his head, is get 10 girls under you, have more abundance, date more than one girl at a time. Don't go into a relationship thinking that I want a relationship. You can be open to one, but that's her job to get that on you. The best advice I can give to this, and it sounds flippant, but there's some depth to it once you mull it over for a bit. It's you gotta hate her a little bit. The one advantage that guys who have been married for a length of time, and I mean like a decade or more, the one they have is they've seen their girl be a cunt enough to know they basically know how to hate her just a little bit. And that keeps your head on straight. When she gives you good behavior, you learn to appreciate it because it's out of character. When she gives you bad behavior, you know that's exactly what you don't want to put up with. You should almost have one foot out the door at all times. And I remember the funniest thing is there is a Twitter account, Chloe Love. She was a phone sex operator into bondage and all that crap. I remember it was something she actually said a while back that kind of reflected a lot of the stuff that you'll read with Royce, Chateau Artiste. And she said the most attractive quality in a man is a man that doesn't want to be around you. Very flippantly said, but like I said, that's the best example. As for a strategy you can use to actually learn this, the best I can say here is to date a girl you don't like, but is attractive enough that you can stand her. I think that's the easiest way to do it. For me, it was a story about a person called the Dog Walker. I think her name was Alicia. And I write about her in my email newsletter, but couldn't stand her. I found she was just a train wreck. Go figure, she had tattoos. Really good job, very sweet girl, but then as soon as you got her privately, she had all the same girl attitude stuff that you worried about before. The first time I had met her, she was over at my house. She was my friend's plate, and she started talking shit about my cousin, so I kicked her out of my house. I physically threw her out like Jazz out of the Fresh Prince's place. And so she ended up fucking Mike in the parking lot. Then they later on, I guess he was dating somebody else and she got jealous. So out of a revenge thing, she started having sex with me, but then she liked the sex with me better, and so she was just my plate there for probably a good half a year. I think she eventually got back together with him, but whatever. I never liked her. I actually actively called her the dog walker because I told her if I use your name, it humanizes you. And I'll tell you right now, the only times in that plate's, I guess, dating experience, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, relationship, because I can't think of a better word. The only time in that relationship where I was unattractive is the times I broke character and asked her why did she let me treat her like this. She shrugged her shoulders, said, I don't know, got up and left. I didn't see her again for a week. Then when she came back, I choked her and they came in her mouth. So, um, yeah, it's a powerful thing. I would say definitely date a girl you don't like, and you're gonna learn more than anything because you're not worried about your feelings. You're not worried about her feelings. You're not worried about what you think her feelings are and what you think she wants. All you really have is a girl that you prefer to have for a warm hole. And nothing is better, I find, than honing your game skills on a girl that you don't care if you lose. So, if I had any advice to give you, it would be that. I've only got one data point of proof that that works. So, you're going to have to try it and get back to me in the chat. Uh, Hopefully that answers your question. Next one is by Kevin. Kevin frequently busts his wife's chops and teases her, but occasionally she says he's being a dick and becomes very angry and annoyed. I am not sure if I'm being too crass and talking to her like my guy friends without realizing it due to lack of game and not knowing how to talk to women, or simply because she is not in my frame yet and I should just ignore or laugh it off like I've been doing. What are your thoughts on this? Calibration. That's right now what you're looking for. Calibration. It is a very common thing for guys when they're running their map and they start running game, they start acting more aloof, and they start being a little more distant with their wife, or as I like to say just now, hating her a little bit. And something happens. It starts to work. And the girl starts shit testing him harder. A lot of guys think shit test is disrespect. All shit testing is the very ingenious red-pilled way to describe the commitment skepticism bias. That's something that I picked up from Why Women Have Sex, written by Dr. Cindy Miston and David Buss. Where did they take it from? Marty Hasselbeck. Dr. Marty Hasselbeck, evolutionary psychologist, who said that girls are automatically distrustful of easy to fake, low investment sexual signals because they had to be. The girls that automatically assume you were lying filtered out for people who gave higher quality investments. So what that means is when you're giving her shit, if she gives you shit back, she's testing to see if you're actually aloof or you're just fucking with her and playing a game. She doesn't know. The attitude to have here is you're setting the reality. This is frame 101. Well, 201. Your reality is you're teasing her, you're nagging her, you're having some fun with it, you're flirting, and you're hurting her feelings a little bit just to get her emotional engagement higher. You can't always have positive emotions. There has to be pull along with your push. So generally, when you get this increased amount of shit testing, it's a way of seeing if it's a legitimate signal or a fake signal that you misread. Easiest way to counter that, like you said, laugh it off, play it through, slap her on the ass, and call it a day. There is a case where, oh yeah, by the way, you say she's very angry and annoyed. Annoyed isn't a bad thing, and angry is not a bad thing. What you're looking for is strong emotions, not positive emotions. You want a mixture of positive and negative emotions, probably more so to the negative side. Because positive emotions, if done in isolation, have a very nasty quality of building an immunity. So yesterday you bought her flowers, today it has to be a ring, tomorrow it has to be a car, and the day after that it's a house to get the same feedback. That's why you want to do push and pull. That's why you want to piss her off. That's why you want her annoyed. And that's why you're having so much fun with this. You have to have fun with this. It's called game for a reason. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. As far as if she's in your frame or not yet, not your concern. You have your frame. She can come in and do what she wants to. And if she wants to play bitch and have a temper tantrum over it, well, then she can do that. And you just have to pull your same boundary enforcement. Pull your affection, pull your attention. Just a little bit. Yeah, go out for the afternoon. I don't feel like dealing with your shit right now. I'm going to go to the gym. It's not hard. But you'll get there. As you do it more often, you're going to notice what the outcome is. And that should be your only guiding principle. Don't care, got laid. Best thing to keep in mind. Do a tweet on Twitter. Quote me on that one. Don't care, got laid. And that's the only thing you should think about. Because let's face it, you're self-reliant on your own. You can earn your own money. You can take care of your own place. You can clean your own place or hire a maid to do it. You really don't need a woman. And I'm saying need. I'm not saying want. I'm saying need. You don't need a woman, but for two things. To borrow her uterus for 9 months and because sex feels better when it's not your hand. But that's not something specific to any one woman. That's for any woman who's willing to fill that role. So I guess the whole point of that, where I'm taking from that, is you think of yourself as the prize and you realize that while it's important, what you're being offered is paling in comparison to what you offer in return. Don't care if it's true or not, it's useful. That's another thing. You're going to see me talk a lot about utility or youthful because I hate when people talk about red pill truths. Another thing that was with my really pedantic Huntsman post, counter post there, where he said we're ruining his traditional women, is everybody keeps looking for truth. And I think truth is ridiculous. Human interactions are messy and there's tons of variables. It is huge ego to assume that we're going to know all the variables and be able to have a truth when it comes to intersexual dynamics. The best we can hope for is something that's useful. So when I say true, take that to mean useful enough that you can use it to predict future behavior based on current activities. There's your Jordan Peterson quote for the day. Second one from Kev. After years of making sure my wife's sexual needs were met before my own, I am now dealing with the opposite. She was not a fan of me saying, sounds like that's a you problem, when I finished and she didn't, although I thoroughly enjoyed saying it. Best way to handle this. Finish her off with other methods or don't get a fuck and go to sleep. There's a nuance to this, and I'm actually very glad you asked it. Obviously, being good in bed is a good thing. Good dick is a great way to have as a mate retention behavior. Girls will not turn down good sex from a hot man if they can help it. But at the same time, you can't be too focused on making her get off. A lot of times, and girls, it's not always about the orgasm. I know it sounds kind of trite, but a lot of the times for them, sex is their way of exchanging sex from her to validation from you. So sometimes getting you off is all the reward she's looking for, and that's the part that gets her off, which is fine. At the same time, her orgasm is her responsibility. Usually with a wife, it tends to be pretty good. Like, you know what it takes to make a girl come. And if there's a huge discrepancy between you and her, there's techniques around that. There's oral, there's finger work, there's switching up your cadence. For women, sex is mostly a mental game. Their erogenous zones are mostly their mind. So if you try to get her warmed up out of nowhere, she's going to be dry and not into it. But at the same time, if you're off on a trip in 2 hours and you have to leave, she's probably going to give you a quickie to keep you loyal. I would say, sounds like that's a you problem. That can go one of two ways. I would say if you're not saying that with a rock solid frame with a big smirk on your face, you're probably just being, oh, I hate saying this because it sounds so femmy, but it's kind of true. You're being insensitive. So she wants to know that she's being taken seriously, even if she's not. So I would suggest, let's go with the 2/3 rule for this one. She doesn't have to get off every time, but 2/3 is a good one. And a little bit of extra effort on your part isn't bad. Definitely tailor that towards how her behavior is towards you. If you ever hear crap in the bedroom like, are you done yet? Or can you hurry up? I would say, fuck it. She can handle her own. Right there, you're establishing a boundary. If she's not enthused to have sex with you, and she's willing to be a warm sock for you, then just use her as such. But generally, I would say the other methods. Something Hotep Jesus actually said, which I found hilarious on this and actually worked really well too. Have sex and then don't finish. And not only don't finish, but don't even be angry or sad or disappointed about it. It's like, oh, thanks, that's good. That was good. Go to work, go in the den, go do something else. Doesn't even matter. I tried that one a couple times and I was amazed how well it worked. Girls take that as a serious hit to their ego. So, yeah, that might be something to add to your repertoire. For further reading, Sex God Method is a great book to help you understand some nuances on this one. But if she's taken too long to come and you're doing more than 3 pumps to survive, I'd suggest it might be worth looking into parts of your game that might need some polishing up. But like I said, it all depends. If she's always been that way, then she's always been that way. One thing I would say is if you want to be more playful instead of sounds like a you problem, is to say, "Hey man, first one's on me. I got you. I got you next time." I think that one's worked well better. It's worked in the past for me and a few friends of mine. Usually when we got off of sales, that was what we used to say on our first times. Like, first one's me. I'll get you on the next one. But we'll go from there and move on. Next one is Marty in sales. Marty, I'm not gonna lie, I love your name, man. I think we've had that call. Fun guy to talk to, I'm not going to lie. The wife nags me all the time about communication. She says I never tell her where I'm going or what I'm doing. How do I set a boundary and tell her it's none of her business? I just ignore her and agree and amplify. You might want to do fogging on this one, to be honest. If it's not her business to know where you are going and what you're doing, which, by the way, guys, it's not about hiding things from your wife. You're maintaining an element of mystery. If they know everything, it tends to dry them up fairly well. So a good part of keeping things exciting is to have her miss you. So that's kind of where he's coming from with this, in case you have that nagging suspicion that you're just trying to hide something from her. Or maybe you are. Either way, and if you are hiding something from her, it gives you the opportunity to have a plausible deniability. To tell her it's none of her business, you can always just say that. I mean, there's nuking. I'll tell you when I'm there. I'll tell you if I run into problems. If her concern is a logistical one, well, I'm going to be making dinner. I don't know when you're going to be back. If that's the case, then she doesn't want to know where you are. She wants to know when you're coming back. I'll be home by 6. Again, you'll have to map this to your actual situation. Beyond that, just fogging. She asks you where you're going out, or where you're going out and what you're doing. You're doing stuff. You're going out. She says you never tell her where you're going, and you go, "Yeah, I'm kind of a dick. I really don't do that, do I?" All right, next time I promise I'll tell you, and then you say that the next time too. At the end of the day, actually, a good resource you can find for this one is a post by one of the Red Pill moderators, the married ones. I'm trying to remember which one. I can't remember if it was Sorcerer or Scorchstang, or maybe UEM McGill. But it's called Verbal Intercourse is Optional. Search that up. I love it because it puts this into perspective. The wife nagging you about where you've been and wanting you to talk and communicate more is exactly the same situation about you getting turned down from sex and then following her around with a raging erection telling her, "Hey, you got to suck this, all right?" Once you internalize how unattractive a behavior that is, you can reframe it as in, this is a very unattractive thing. Pass the comfort test if that's the case. Pass the shit test if that's the case. If it's a logistical issue, deal with the logistics and not what she's asking, what she actually wants to know. I think it gives a nice little roadmap into there. Why is it telling me about Fail Army on YouTube? I don't give a shit. So I hope that one works. Agree and amplify, not really so well there as a tool. Agree and amplify is largely done if somebody's being irrational, to point out how irrational they are without taking it too seriously. In this case, I think fogging is your best tool, or just nuking it by saying I don't care to tell you. Next one is Kevin. I have a huge internal resistance to dressing better on a daily basis. Normally, I dress in athletic gear or jeans. The fuck is wrong with you? God damn it, Kevin. Jeans and a t-shirt. Is this resistance common? And do you have any tips on overcoming this? If you really want a hardcore tip, I would say kiss a man on the mouth. Once that's done, you're going to find out you don't like it, and then you don't have to worry anymore about dressing making you feel gay. Because I'm pretty sure that's where it stems. Some kind of discomfort or uncomfortability. My answer to that, while obviously I don't mind a t-shirt and jeans depending on the place, it shouldn't be your go-to. Athletic clothes, fucking get rid of them. Have 2 pairs for the gym. Wash one, wear one, throw out the rest. That's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. And you look like a bag of shit. I haven't even seen you, but I'm telling you, you look like a bag of shit. 100%. It's like, why? I don't know if you're one of these guys, but there's lots of guys that live in the suburbs and they take immaculate care of their lawn. They love it. They deal with all the nuances. Or maybe you're a guy who takes care of your truck. You always keep it clean. Your vehicle's nice. You do the oil changes on time, the undercoating if you're in a snowy area. Guys take care of so much of their stuff, but the one thing they don't take care of is their appearance and their hygiene. And it drives me nuts. It's like that's the one thing that you have that nobody else has is you. And yeah, you just got to stop giving a fuck how you feel. Who cares how you feel? You feel uncomfortable wearing a nice shirt? Fuck it. You got to get better. You know what? Wear stuff. And It's not about just going out and dressing up in a suit when you're going to the grocery store. Sometimes things are easy. I would suggest learn about why clothing is the way it is. So I'll use an example. You guys know what khakis are. Did you also know that khakis aren't a pant at all? They're a color. They're technically chinos. Khaki is the color of the chino. Chinos were called chinos because they were cotton pants and they were brought over when the Chinese immigrated to North America. And that's why they were called chinos. The American Navy picked them up, or was it the British Navy? I can't remember which, but regardless, for the point, what had happened is they were working in tropical climates in India or Polynesia or somewhere around there. And the tropical whites were too hard to keep clean without the infrastructure back home. So what he had done is he had actually come up with a way of washing them in like coffee beans and that, gave him a certain khaki stain to him, and those became much easier to clean. And so that's where khaki came from. It's actually a military process to sort out the problem of not being able to look professional in a tropical setting. A lot of American fashion comes from military. Actually, most fashion comes from military backgrounds. So if you're the kind of guy who's like, oh, I don't want to wear that because it makes me look like a dripping homo, then you're really missing out on the history of clothing. Polo shirts are another example. Did you know polo shirts are technically athletic gear? They were developed for people who were playing horse polo. And they wanted to be able to dress nice with a collared shirt, but it was just too hot and it was too hard to maneuver. So they had developed this shirt, basically a t-shirt, put a collar on it. So when you're dressing in a polo shirt, don't think of it as dressing. And this tells you about the formality too. So you're not actually dressing in a polo shirt because you want to dress up. You're dressing in a polo shirt because you're dressing down. It's the same as wearing a t-shirt, the way you think of it now. A t-shirt is the same as walking out of the house in your underwear. So when you wear a nice tight-fitting t-shirt and you're in shape, that's the equivalent of a girl walking out in a tank top with her cleavage hanging out. And you'll be amazed how once you learn why clothes are the way they are, that you haven't started wearing them with a little bit more enthusiasm, pride, or at the very least, interest. And this goes for everything. Scarves. Scarves were there to keep warm, obviously, but then there's also like a summer scarf, like a pashmina or a handkerchief, that sort of thing. The reason I like those is because their history came from like the Lawrence of Arabia fighting in the Middle East thing. Sweat basically made it so guys couldn't handle any of their gear, blocked their vision, made it too hard to handle a firearm. And so they had basically taken the keffiyeh, the afyal, and a lot of the Middle Eastern Arabic clothing, and they adopted it to military sensibilities. And so that's where the kerchief or the keffiyeh or the linen scarf had come from. So like I said again, it's funny when you notice this. All these things have military backgrounds. Boat shoes, same thing. Boat shoes are designed to be a more formal shoe on sport boating. And that's why they exist. So you realize that's the kind of thing if you're out in a barbecue, if you're on a yacht club, any of those kind of activities, a boat shoe is appropriate dress. Where a loafer is more of an appropriate dress because when you're loafing around the house. You start to learn about why things are the way they are, and I'm ranting on about this, but I don't care. I like talking about clothes. Then once you start understanding the purpose of clothes, like why would you wear a pea coat over a top coat over an overcoat? What is a windbreaker for? Why would you wear khakis versus a different colored chino? What are the purpose of jeans, of denim? Those were like miners. They were very heavy duty. They were work clothes. They signal somebody's working for a living. If you're in a place where that kind of thing is seen as like a redneck thing, you probably maybe want to skip away from denim and switch over to chinos or more refined clothing. Especially, and I guess I'll leave it on this. I could probably talk for an hour on this, but I don't want to waste your guys' time just talking about clothes. Learn about clothes. Just learn. Whether you're comfortable or not is irrelevant. Learn why they're there. If you're going to work, you're going to learn why you'd want to wear a pair of Dickies over a pair of jeans, over a pair of chinos, over a pair of wool slacks. You're going to learn why you'd want to wear a polo shirt versus a t-shirt versus a Henley versus a button-up shirt versus an Oxford button-down. Everything on those shirts, like we're not women's clothes. Our clothes are generally built for function. Even if that function no longer exists, the idea behind that function still exists. And so this is something you can really become familiar with. A small piece of homework for now, if you want to actually get into this, find out why some colored shirts come with white collars. Great thing to teach you a little bit about how and why clothing is there. The rule of thumb and if you're going to dress American, stick to a lot of the World War II clothing styles. I think that's a good start. Tommy Hilfiger has tried his best to make his own version of that and modernize it. So good starting points for you to go with there. I see your chats. I'll finish the questions and I'll get to those for you guys. What do we have as the next question? Doing the Hodge Twins things. I'm doing it via phone. Internal resistance. Dude, nut up. I don't feel comfortable wearing a shirt that isn't made out of fucking plastic. I'd make fun of you more, but you've been a supporter all this time, so I definitely want you to succeed. Congrats on 59 Patreons. Try not to get a big head like a barber. Like a retarded barber. Oh, boy. You know what? Screw it. These are private enough. I normally don't like talking shit, but these guys have made it so damn difficult not to. Like, they dunk on themselves constantly, and they just won't stay out of my mention. So if they want attention, they got it. I think the best understanding I was given about the recent Bruno hot takes is he sounds like an old man trying to appeal to the younger generation. Hello, fellow children. I don't get it. I have a hard time believing it's sincere, but maybe that's because and this is one of those things that I'm not proud to admit, I finally got around to reading Ryan Holiday's book, Trust Me, I'm Not Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator. As I watch it, all of this recent beef makes much more sense to me. It reminds me of somebody going through his book and adopting and really crudely trying to use the same techniques that he used to propel Tucker Max to fame on their own shitty brands. Would have been fine. I've said it before, and I kind of don't mean it insincerely. Had they just gone to us privately and said this was the plan, we would have helped them with it. I think creating that beef, give them all the drama queens and keep all the content creators, I think would have been a great trade-off. Definitely would have been the case that Anthony and I wouldn't have essentially switched social media followings, me from starting from nothing and him now at nothing, with me taking over what he used to be at. Same thing with Bruno. I'll dunk on him a little bit because Carl's given me the advice that never dunk on people that are smaller than you in follower count, because it just gives them free advertising, and that's why they're micking at you. Always pick on equal accounts or bigger accounts, although expect the bigger accounts to ignore you. So that's where it is. I'll probably dunk on Bruno until he's down below 10,000 people, or I'm up at 20, God knows. And then I'm going to leave him alone too. The whole trad thing, like I said, there's no way he believes this. He's been divorced 15 years, estranged from his kids. If he still has this all you must respect the women mentality, then I don't really know what to tell you. Like, there's no way he believes this. And in that post he made, what's wrong with the red pill, and then screaming about us being angry. You see the difference? There's murderers over there. Yeah, it just seems to me, it reminds me a lot of when women are arguing with you about some red pill principle, usually dread, and usually a whole misrepresentation of it because they're just projecting what their asshole ex-husband was like anyway. But it seems more like he's trying to convince himself that he respects women and not so much accusing us of not doing it. I put out a post today, and if you have some time, it's only 2,000 words. It's not a huge read, but I would say it's worth it. It's where I talk about in more detail what I mean when I tell guys to have a healthy level of narcissism. It's authenticity. And you've heard that word a lot. If you followed anybody in this space, I know Hunter's big on using it. Most guys love saying authenticity, and they use that when they're, excuse me. A great quote from The Last Psychologist I remember is that Americans are obsessed with authenticity. Not actually being authentic, but giving the impression of it. And this is where I make the case that authenticity is a healthy level of narcissism. The two are used interchangeably. Because traditional conservatism is essentially a narcissistic fantasy. And it's something I go over in depth. I'll kind of sum it up quickly here. Narcissism, you can't look it up by the APA or any clinical diagnosis. The problem is they don't actually describe a thing, they just use a couple markers. For example, if you want to describe what a person is, well, a person has the certain qualities where he has a foot, he has an eye, and he has a liver. So if he has those three things, he must be a person. Yeah, well, dogs have those things too. Okay, so he's got those three qualities, but he's missing anything to do about dogism. And that's how narcissism and many disorders are defined. So they don't actually tell you about the person. It's this weird subset of correlation. And the problem with that is people then take that to be the definition and they miss the larger picture. The best example I've seen of narcissism came from an amalgamation of both the great writer Venkatesh Rao and the last psychiatrist who actually, or psychiatrist who is a psychiatrist, who had said, from a perspective of mental models and narrative frameworks, they're a person that is insecure about not achieving a certain goal, usually love with another person or human interaction or human contact. They build an elaborate fantasy, putting themselves as the protagonist in their story as an archetype that is best able to achieve that goal. That's narcissism. And it fits because narcissism isn't just about the guy who brags about how great he is. There is a martyr form of narcissism, which is even more pernicious. That is where guys think that they are like, you think of the gamma male. I should have been something if it wasn't for my bitch ex-wife, or if my boss wasn't keeping me down, I'd make the company so much money, or everybody's an idiot but me. That's also narcissism. Now, here's the thing. By arguing with the guy, you become the antagonist. The story still goes on, and he's fine. But when you disregard the story, that's when narcissistic rage happens. And that's the only response to a narcissistic injury. It's different than anger. Anger is a social response. Anger is my way of telling you that you're causing an injustice and I want you to stop it, or else I'm going to escalate to violence. It's a social emotion. Rage is like when you put your hand on the stove. You just yank it off and flail your arm behind you. And if somebody puts your hand on there, you headbutt them to get it out of there. You're not thinking. It's pure unbridled emotion. Limbic brain, all that stuff. The equation I make to unhealthy versus healthy narcissism is that authenticity. Think of the Tradcon. He considers himself to be Norman Rockwell. I am saving the West. I'm going to build a big family. I am going to be the head of the household, the protector, and my woman is going to desire and adore me. She's not a human being. She's a set piece. And this is how getting zeroed out, as Rollo put it, came about, is that when these guys have a wife who no longer accepts the narrative and she decides to go live her own story, well then he gets his narcissistic rage, and that's being zeroed out. Sometimes it's about that crazy guy in Colorado, who basically murdered his whole family, killed his two daughters, his wife, then shot himself. I think there's another one that happened to those recently too, or just puts the bullet in his own mouth, or just becomes crippling alcoholic with depression. That's where the Tradcon gets when they get their narcissistic injury. Authenticity, on the other hand, is where you kind of realize, and it's a game. I use the example of Don Draper in Mad Men. The narcissist assumes that Don Draper is the aspirational model. In reality, the narcissist is Dick Whitman, assuming he's going to be Don Draper, having a temper tantrum and a narcissistic rage every time somebody calls him out on not being Don Draper. To be authentic is to actually be John Hamm. He's the actor that plays the character. And if you were to go up to him and say, Don Draper's not real, you're just faking it, he would go, yeah, it's a movie. What are you expecting? And he kind of laughs it off. But everybody everybody buys into the lie because everybody wants to buy into the lie. And that's where I say the degenerate pickup artist type, the guy with game, he's probably the most honest woman, or the most honest guy that women have. He's lying. He's making up a story. She knows he's making up a story. He's involved her in the process of making up the story. So they've made up a story together. See, she essentially gets to live her own home version of whatever romance novel she's reading. She knows it's a lie. He knows it's a lie. But in that way, it creates an authentic value to it. It's doing something to please and show value to the other person. In reality, she sits at home eating ice cream all day. He plays World of Warcraft or whatever game, I guess Fortnite now. And that's the real part of them. But here's the thing, and here's the big difference. When the narcissist gets what he wants, because it's not hard to lie to women and get them their pants, a lot of guys are good at it. When the TradCon guy promises Norman Rockwell and delivers Archie Bunker, two things happen. She gets mad because she was sold a dud bill of goods, pulled a bait and switch, and he gets mad because she was stupid enough to fall for it. The narcissist never gets what he wants because it's a hollow victory. I had to lie and manipulate to get you here. I know I was lying. I developed this entire false persona. And now that you're here, only a low IQ, low quality woman could possibly have fallen for it. So there's no way that you actually love me. You just fell in love with a persona and a lie. And that's why you'll see a lot of these guys do what we call blue pill cheating. They go out and try and seek validation from other girls. It's an empty hole that never gets filled. Because they don't actually be honest with the new women. They just wear a new mask. So for authenticity, I just make the argument that it's game. And all this ties down to why I think Bruno's an idiot. He's building this narcissistic fantasy of the wise old man that gives wonderful advice, is great with game because he's got that 1950s take the girl to the ye old malt shoppy and that'll get her wet. But he'll wait until marriage. It's a lie, and if he doesn't know it's a lie, he should fucking know better. And any girl he gets with it, he's not gonna like. And the fact that it resonates at all with the segment of the young male population just shows how far we've fallen as a gender. Anyways, enough of that heavy topic. Let's see what we got here on the comments. You're the best leader coach in the manosphere. Oh, thank you very much. Ooh. Actually, I'll get a small story in this one too. This is kind of funny. I had a client call a couple days back, and his story isn't really important. It's same as a lot of guys, a case of one-itis, whatever. But I guess he was one of those guys that Carl jokingly referred to in his rants, how he had called a bunch of other guys before me. And I would say to any guy here, and I've had another call this week too, where a guy was actually doing a consulting service. He didn't mean to. It's just like a side thing for him. It's just, friends of his and their wives usually just tend to come to him for advice. And so he's kind of been giving it out. A few tips for you guys if you're going to try and red pill your friends or do any sort of consulting, coaching. I hate the word coaching, or lifestyle consulting, I think might be a good term. I like consulting because it's more accurate. A coach implies responsibility. If you're coaching a player, you're taking on the responsibility for that one. There is nobody in this online space, not Dr. Babe Dude Love, not Donovan, not me, not Rich, nobody who can take responsibility for anybody who listens to our message. Even if we wanted to, there is no mechanism for us to suffer a consequence if one of you takes our advice and does something wrong. And so I think it's disingenuous to say that you're a coach, because you can't fill that role. Consulting is better. Consulting implies that you aren't the archetype. You're not trying to be the person's narcissistic fantasy. You're not trying to be the aspirational model, but you do have skills and you do have knowledge. Now you're going to provide them to somebody who has tools for them to map to their own life. At the same time, it's a very clear boundary that, your job is to advise, not to control. Same as a lawyer. A lawyer will never tell you what to do. He will give you your options and then have you make the decision and let you know the inherent risks, because the lawyer cannot take responsibility for you. It's just not part of their thing. But down to the tips. 1, never insult your client. If you're yelling or arguing with your client, you're doing it wrong. They came to you for guidance, and if you need to argue with them, then you're not making the points well, or they're not ready for your services. Regardless, yelling at them is not going to solve that. 2, they have to be more invested in what you consult them on than you are. If I were to feed you guys a ton of information as a consult client and you didn't want to hear it, there is nothing I can say that'll make you implement any of it. And so we're just wasting each other's time. You have to gauge the level of commitment the other person is comfortable with. Don't talk about things as in good or bad. Always try to mention things with respect to, I think good frameworks are risk or potential outcomes based on past experiences. So, for example, the Marty in sales question about his wife smacking her in the ass, her getting annoyed. You bring up, like, okay, you can smack her in the ass and completely own it. The consequences on this one are probably going to be either she actually is mad, in which case you may want to deal with the issue front on. Most likely, nobody's going to divorce over a couple hurt feelings. If it was something more serious, like if you're going to cheat on your wife because she hasn't had sex with you in 6 months and you're on the 8th level of dread and she doesn't care that you said fuck me or fuck you, then yeah, here's the risks that are going to be involved with cheating. A, reputation management. B, falling for the other girl. C, not being discreet enough and having to get around in a girl's social circle. D, connecting an STD. These are all things you understand are risks. So if you can go forward doing this thing, here's the things you can use to mitigate these risks as best you can, but those risks are there and you have to accept them as consequences. Once you can articulate these things in a more pragmatic way like that, it's giving the other person the tools to make the best decision for himself. Just telling him what he should do is not helping him, and he probably won't do it anyway, at least if he has a half ounce of sense. Third big rule I can give is don't just tell him to read a book. I do this myself. If you want to learn more, there's Ian Wood, there's Robert Greene. The point is, the books have a purpose to learn more. But if you can't at least articulate the cliff notes of the message within a book, then you really have no business recommending it. Think of it like anything. Think of it like a date. Hey, you should date my friend Cindy. You'd love her. She's a great girl. Well, what about Cindy? Oh, just come with us on Tuesday. You'll see. Close your eyes and picture that scenario playing out in your head. Do you actually want to meet Cindy? Or does the idea of possibly running into a giant, fat, angry lady scaring the shit out of you? If it's not, then you're not doing this right or you've never been on a blind date. Your friend needs to be able to describe Cindy to you in a way that makes you interested in Cindy. Look, Cindy just got out of a relationship. She has no idea how to date. And so what she's doing is she knows I do these podcasts. She still calls. She doesn't know how to date. She's been in great shape. She spent the last year getting into shape because her husband was cheating on her. And she's just out to have a good time, no commitment. She just feels really awkward in a new city. I was just going to introduce her to people. Either you can make a friend or maybe something romantic. That's fine. I would definitely say she's a 7 out of 10. Makes you much more likely to want to date Cindy. If you have a photo, even better. So if you can't red pill somebody with the information off the top of your head and to be able to explain and articulate it in words that matter to the other person, don't waste your time. They're just going to think you're an idiot trying to proselytize them. In fact, don't anyway. Guys are going to fight you tooth and nail on this stuff. Being the example is a much better tool than running your mouth about how great Rollo Tomassi is. Be in good shape. Have girls do things. Dribs and drabs is often good too, where, hey, when was the last time you had sex with your wife? Well, 3 weeks. What about you? I don't know. Tuesday? Really? Well, what before then? I don't know. Tuesday morning. So once you start showing you're having successes, then if they want to know more, well, how'd you get that? Well, how'd you do this? And you just drip feed a little bit. Well, all I did was play a little more aloof. I stopped worrying about hurting her feelings. And then once they're interested to the point that maybe they want to try something, then maybe you can give them something to work with. But at the same time, it's almost one of those things a guy has to find himself. So if you want to be one of the Rollo Tomassi's chosen people, you probably shouldn't be proselytizing people anyways. I'll give Rational Layaway as a book. Rollo likes it when you guys do that. So how are we doing for time? Oh, wow. It's almost an hour already. I'm going to go till about quarter after because I spent a lot of the time just mutingly staring into the camera, running my mouth, and nobody could hear anything. If you guys don't know, Saturday, we got Saturday morning cartoons coming up. What we mean by that is back in the day for any kids who weren't 80s and 90s kids and they don't know, before the internet was big, Saturday morning is when all the cartoons would always show up. Always Saturday morning. It was the reason to get up in the morning. And you'd sit there and you'd go through Thundercats, He-Man, GI Joe, A Team, Hulk Hogan's Rock and Roll Wrestling, and a whole bunch of list of them. So what we're doing is Red Morning, 9 till 10. Cutting it short. Carl is going to switch straight off to Masculine Geek, who's going to do a 10 to 11:30 cast where they talk about geek stuff in the mornings. And then right after that, 11:30, we're going to switch over to Rule Zero and do the hour and a half, 2 hours there. So that's going to be a whole morning. It's going to be a lot of fun. I know a lot of you guys have asked about podcast formats. I've looked into it. I'll be able to do one on mine. Rule Zero is going to be hard because we're bouncing it between channels. So if you want to have that for like a workout, something to listen to there, you might actually have to go to YouTube Premium for that. But so the way I've seen it before, and I'm going to have to run some tests here eventually, see what happens, is I believe if I create the podcast and upload all the stuff to SoundCloud, I can use SoundCloud to create an RSS feed. And from there, I can move that to iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and there was another one that people, Anchor.fm, I think was the other one. So once I've figured out a system to do that and largely automate it, because I just don't have the schedule to manually do all that every week, we'll try and get that on there. As an alternative, what I'll do is just record a separate podcast aside from Red Morning and put it on there. I'll try and make it a shorter one. The way I see it, most work commutes and workouts are 45 minutes. So I want to keep the thing under an hour. I think that's going to be the best use of somebody's time. And I'll leave it with that. I guess I got a couple minutes. I'm just going to run my mouth. But actually, this is good because this goes on to Miller Lite Masculinity. So I'll end on this thing here. It's a bit more of it's not a game-related thing. Leave some more stuff in the next week's post there if you guys want to talk more about game and banging chicks and that. For now, I'm kind of going meta masculinity, so that's been the theme for the last couple days here with the posts I've been writing. Symbols of masculinity. That's why Carl and I make so much fun of Miller Lite masculinity. Shooting guns at the range doesn't make you a man. Whiskey, bacon-scented beard oil doesn't make you a man. Having a big, long, bushy beard and doing that cockeyed thing that everybody has to do when they have a beard with the slick back undercut doesn't make you a man. Having said that, I got a bunch of goofy trinkets up here that also don't make me a man. Oh, I'm gonna have to bring it down, bring it on camera. Watch me just break this on camera. I'll cry, man. Dog's sleeping down here. I'm trying not to step on him. This is the first one. If you haven't seen it, it is a decanter of British Navy Pusser's rum. In the Navy, we have a tradition, or at least I assume we have a tradition, of your first foreign port to buy yourself a bottle of Pusser's on the duty free. And on your final sale before you retire, you're supposed to drink it with your friends. So I bought that in 2004 on HMCS Algonquin, which got smashed up pretty good now, so it no longer exists, when we went to San Diego. I drank it the weekend of my retirement when I flew some buddies in from Quebec City, Halifax, and Vancouver to have my retirement party. Turns out Pusser's rum is absolutely horrible, and one that's been aged for 12 years. I don't know if it makes it worse or better, but we powered through it. But that was good. So it's not so much a symbol. Like, I've earned that thing. It's not just some random symbol saying, look, I'm a man. And this kind of should go back to Marty's question about I feel uncomfortable wearing clothes. Another thing guys are uncomfortable with is furnishing their house. The one thing I tell guys to do is have your pieces tell a story. Don't go to Pier 1 and buy goofy balls. Everything you have should be a story. Second one of my symbols of masculinity. This is a World War I style Sultan pipe. A guy who actually was a fan of what I was doing with the 21 convention was a former vet in the British Army. He died 6 months ago, and I was basically gifted a whole bunch of his pipe collection because he found out I'd been a pipe smoker. It was the one thing I learned from Bruno. It was kind of fun. Smoking a pipe is like your once a week thing just before writing for the week. So that one was too cool. I can't smoke on it. I just wanted to keep it. So I like it. That's kind of a reminder of military guy who thought I could find all these things a good home, which I may do one of these days. When I was in Dubai, I managed to get this, one of them fancy Dubai knives. Picked it up when I was screwing around, or no, that was Oman, in a Bedouin camp. Riding camels, eating dates, hanging out there with my one driver, Ali. We were trying to go down to the caves in Oman to go splunking. If you guys don't know, the movie Rambo 3, the scene where he's fighting the Russians inside of sand caves, that was in Oman. We never got to go, but I did get the knife, so equally cool. Like I said, all these things earned, they all have a story. The map behind this is eventually going to be me pointing little pinpoints on every place in the world I've been to. The shadow box, if you haven't seen it, that's usually a signifier of every ship I've been posted to, all of my decorations, my medals, my rank. The only thing I can't fit in there is the Order of Magellan, Order of Sinbad, and I got two other ones I can't remember. Those are some other symbols. I got one for circumnavigating the globe. The Order of Heracles was when I went through the gates of Gibraltar. But that's the one thing I find separates symbols of masculinity from trinkets of masculinity, or like war trophies. I guess they're also symbols, but that's the thing. They're kind of earned. Like you did something to achieve them. Growing a beard isn't an achievement. Shooting a gun pretending that you're protecting your family from a standing position is not masculine. It's not a thing you did to do that. It's just you're playing. You're LARPing around. So I would suggest when you guys go to furnish your house, find these things that have a personal story to them, especially if there's some hardship or a funny story, even if it's something you screwed up. I have masks from most of the countries I've been to, and I had one from Puerto Rico. Big crack right down the middle because the instant I bought it, I was so drunk I slipped on the street and broke it within the minute I bought it. So I kind of like having that there, showing that time I cracked the bone in my knuckle on a thing from around the world. So I'll leave you guys with that. Decorate your houses, put on some nice clothes, learn why colored shirts have white collars on them sometimes, and don't be afraid of embracing your inner metrosexual. On that note, I'll see you guys on the weekend for Red Morning. I'll catch you later. Oh, how embarrassing.